Next, for our Vice President candidate, we have Moss Robeson.
That's it. It's okay. My name is Moss. Because I can ramble, I'm just going to read something. All right. In my time at Purchase, I've come to believe that the PSGA is one of the greatest sources of injustice on this campus because the people who are supposed to be fighting for us are so often fighting against us, or at least those of us trying to fight for something. At the heart of this issue is the fact that the student government is not a democratic institution. Anyone who tells you otherwise has been duped or is trying to dupe you, because for starters, this is a very unique exception that we have multiple people running for the vice president position, but normally many, if not most, candidates will run unopposed because essentially it's only the friends of PSGA insiders who are actively recruited to get involved. Aside from a couple of emails, none of which are from students, there's no serious outreach to encourage a student body to join. The PSGA, as one prominent club leader told me the other day, is basically a cult. So by that logic, why trust me to join its leadership? Because for one thing, I'm not accepting the money, but more importantly, it's because in my time at Purchase, I've probably been the loudest critic of the undemocratic nature of the PSGA and the authoritarian powers of the executives, particularly the chair of Senate, who until recently has by default served as the chair of Elections Committee. The conflict of interest with the chair of elections. The chair of Senate can appoint students to fill Senate vacancies, so by neglecting their duties as chair of elections, the chair of Senate has had more power to appoint whoever they want to the PSGA's legislative organ. My freshman year, when I got the Senate to call for special elections instead of letting the chair of Senate appoint people, the chair manipulated the senators they appointed to accept a veto by the executive board. Basically, I just want to make the PSGA democratic. I've been trying to make the PSGA have real elections for years, and they've gone every which way to refuse that. I also want to use steering committee to rewrite the rules of the PSGA and make it democratic. And I think basically I want to abolish the Senate because it's just a terrible nightmare. And I'm writing a manifesto that'll be out by the end of the week, so you can read all the specifics of that. But yeah.
All right, you have 5 minutes to take questions from the body.
Okay, questions, yeah.
Why would you want to join an art organization that you essentially just said you want to abolish?
Well, I want to replace it with something a lot better.
So repeal and replace? Is that the one?
Yeah, except I'm not Republican. Yeah. That's Trump, right? Yeah, so.
How successful do you think you're going to be working with other members of the PSGA when you criticize them so harshly?
I mean, the point is they have to work with me. I've passed resolutions in the Senate that have been vetoed. I've had things that have been passed and then just they refused to implement them. I was behind the drop box. I was behind the voting records last year. They vetoed that stuff my freshman year. They vetoed things to do elections. As a senator, I was, at least in terms of how many things I passed and got done, just about the most effective person on the Senate. They had me removed from Senate, so they can remove me from e-board, I guess, if I do anything wrong, but I won't. But yeah, I don't know. I have experience in the PSGA, so it's not rebel without a cause. I know what I'm doing. I also have been running the student activist group on campus, Push, for a few years, and basically the PSGA is just I don't know. I really do mean it when I say I think the PSGA is one of the biggest sources of injustice on this campus, because how are we going to fight for things from the school when the student government is fighting against you? You know, my freshman year, when Black Lives Matter stuff started on this campus, the biggest issue was getting the student government behind it. Students organizing, not the school. The school was happy to throw some crumbs off the table and be here's a Black Studies program that we're going to take away next year. But the PSGA, created, there was a secret society of white supremacists in the PSGA trying to obstruct Black student demands that year. So it's but the thing is, even when you put in progressive liberal kids into the student government, it really changes them. And it's the PSGA is such a microcosm for how power corrupts people. And you have to really see it to believe it. You just got to go to a Senate meeting and watch the gavel. Yeah, Demetrius.
You just like you're talking about just the whole idea of just going against students. And like the e-board now, like you can see like prior to like the last 3 or 4 e-boards, it's definitely a new season altogether. So like, how do you feel about joining this e-board versus the prior experiences that you've had? Because we've only been operating for 2 weeks now.
I mean, I do think this year's e-board seems like a lot better people. But the thing is, it's not, at the end of the day, what I've learned is it's not about the individuals. It's about the system of the PSGA, which is an extremely undemocratic thing, and it just kind of like has a tendency to create, even if you put totally random people in the PSG, I don't know, there's a big, huge issue of nepotism that's like just embedded in the way the PSGA works, and all the power and responsibilities are centralized. And I want to elevate power of student groups and like the dorms on campus. That was something I was trying to do my freshman year, is to organize the dorms. We don't need senators who don't represent anyone but themselves, and usually aren't even elected. They run like unopposed most by the end of the year. I mean, this whole vice president thing is also partially being created because I was the loudest critic of the powers of the chair of Senate, and they don't have to give me credit for that. I'm not looking for credit for that, but like, it's just like, this is basically what I've always been trying to do at my time at Purchase, is to democratize the PSGA. And by democratize, I don't mean this fake
1 minute.
representative democracy where we go through, I mean, it's like, this is a perfect example of what's wrong with the PSGA, is for me and anyone else who's here today, we had to get 100 signatures to qualify to be here. The PSGA doesn't lift a finger to actually encourage anyone to get involved. Why aren't they tabling to get people to get involved in the PSGA? Because they don't want people to get involved in the PSGA. It's easier when you can just tell your friend to run, and they're the only person running, you know. That's all. Yeah, there's questions.
I get 26 seconds if you really want to go for it.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, like, if you were to win, what would be your first, like, biggest action that you want to take to take the seat?
Again, I'm writing something like a plan, a blueprint for all the changes I want to make with student government that I'll have out by the end of this week. Basically, first I want to do reforms of the student government, just make it like a functioning student government, and then I want to try to go a step further. I am excited by that. Okay, you'll hear about this.